Our text this morning comes from the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 7, beginning with verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah with his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife and 3 wives of his son entered the ark. They and every wild animal of every kind, and all domestic animals of every kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every bird of every kind, every bird, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded, and the Lord shut him in. The word of God for you, the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. A young couple moved into a new neighborhood. And the next morning, while they were eating breakfast, the young woman saw her neighbor hanging for wash on the line next door. And she said to her husband, "That laundry is not clean. She doesn't know how to wash clothes properly. Perhaps she needs better laundry soap," the husband said. Well, the next morning, or the 2 days after that, a couple of days after that, the woman was hanging laundry on the line again, and the young wife said, "Look, she's hanging dirty laundry out on the line again. She needs to know how to prepare laundry better." This time the husband said nothing. Then a couple of days later, the young wife looked out the window and saw the neighbor hanging clothes on the line again, and she says, "Look, somebody has taught her to do it properly. Those clothes are clean." And the husband said, "No, I cleaned the window." There are some harsh words directed at the church today. I hear words like charlatan, frauds, religious jerks, hypocrites, of course. That's what some are saying about us. Why? Why would they say that? Well, the world is watching us. They hear us. They watch what we do. They see how we interact. They watch how we treat others. They watch how we treat one another. They listen to us. And what we say about the world, our politics, our fellow workers, our neighbors, and yes, even fellow church members. An older gentleman said something to me at lunch a few weeks ago that really gave me pause. He said, "You know, buddy, I used to hope that Christians would go into the world and act like they do on Sunday. And he said, now I hope they don't go into the world and act like they do on Sunday." Then he went on to tell me what he saw happen in a Sunday school class and the conversation that he heard in the narthex, this scathing commentary in the church narthex. And he said to me, "I don't know if I can do this anymore." It reminded me of something Mark Twain said when asked about church, who, by the way, it is told, became an atheist because of his church experience. He said, I fear if Christians were thrown into the lion's den today, it would be the lions who would be eaten. Because the lions would have a terrible disadvantage with the Christian due to their lack of experience. Now, when you read Paul's epistle, it's easy to see his love for the Christian church. He started church after church after church, all the way from Jerusalem to Rome. He loved the church, but he knew what was going on in the church as well. There was evil in the church. There was evil there. And wherever evil exists, there is division. There is rancor. There's dysfunction. Relationships are broken by malice, and their dissatisfaction about the present and resent towards the future becomes paramount. So Paul writes to that church in Ephesus these words: Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, that he may sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself, this glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy, holy, and without blemish. What is church? Well, physically, it's a place to give service to God through worship. Spiritually, it's a fellowship of believers who come together to do ministry and to do mission in a fallen world. It is a communion of believers who happen to love one another, to learn from one another, and to lift up one another, and guide one another, and yes, even hold one another accountable for their character and conduct. I wonder what the postmodern world sees today. I wonder, after seeing stuff on Facebook and Instagram and hearing people talk in the community, I wonder what people are seeing when they look at the church today. You know, the Christian church in Europe has been on decline since the end of World War II. And today, some of the massive cathedrals in Europe are nothing more than museums. And the church in the United States has been on decline, the Christian church in the United States has been on decline since the late 60s. It was slow then, and it's been accelerating ever since. Traditional style worship is steadily in decline. The increase in contemporary worship seems to be solid, but even now it has stabilized. And if you add traditional and contemporary together, nothing has increased. We've just kind of thin the water out. In other words, contemporary has not been all that evangelistic. The young are just not joining the church anymore. In fact, from what I just read, some believe they can do better Christian service without the burden of the Christian church. Think about that for a second. The Christian church and our politics. It makes me wonder, have we lost our influence in the society we live in today? Have we lost our influence on our culture? You know, back in the 70s, we tried to do everything political. You know, the moral majority, all that kind of stuff. We tried to influence votes. And that's not what we were called to do. We were called to influence souls. Souls. Thus, we've ended up with a church that the world sees fractured, disjointed, angry, mean-spirited, and just as political as the world itself. It seems that our differences today are more important to us than what we hold in common. Am I wrong?
Therefore, we have not only blue states and red states, we got blue churches and red churches. Yeah. You know, we are all consumed about what we don't like rather than what we should be and who we should be. Should not the Christian church respond to all the issues in our society and the issues that are confronting us as a denomination? Shouldn't we respond to all those things in a loving, Christ-like, centered manner? Am I wrong? Should we not be about striving for unity in spirit? Shouldn't we be striving for unity in purpose? Yes, there's evil out there in the world. And like Paul said 2,000 years ago, there's evil in here. Because if we're truly honest before God, we must admit that. 40 years ago, when I became a United Methodist minister, I used to take comfort in the passage where Jesus says to Peter, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." I don't take comfort in that anymore, because I'm not as concerned about the gates of hell on the outside of the church now confronting the church. I am more concerned about the gates of hell within. Given the dissension, the anger, the resentment, the hostility, and the fracturedness of the Christian church, at least in the United States, it apparently seems hell has infiltrated the ranks and file of the Christian church. Both pews and pulpits. Pulpits too. I know you're relieved for me to say that. Sadly, many areas of the church have become mean-spirited. There's a cottage industry that's forming right now. Authors are writing more and more about mean Christians. Mean Christians. I think you're reading a book about mean Christians, aren't you?
It's an autobiography.
Isn't that supposed to be an oxymoron? Isn't that an oxymoron, mean and Christian? How is it that a people of faith, a people who have experienced grace, be so graceless? You know, and I feel competent to speak on this, because I know when I forget grace inside of myself, that's when I become ornery and cantankerous and mean-spirited. It's when I remember that grace of God in my life, that whoever's out there, except by the grace of God, there goes I, like Martin Luther said. Then grace, and charity, and love, and mercy abounds. Yeah, we forget grace. For the Christian, our identity is not only found in who we are by nature, but who we are by the grace of God. We're not only sinners. Martin Luther called it simulus et peccator in Latin. And simulus et peccator simply means we're simultaneously saint and sinner. Simultaneously saint and sinner. We are the adopted children of God, forgiven, restored, loved, and secured in the grace of God. And this, above all things, promotes, I think, humility. It should promote meekness and kindness. It should promote generosity and camaraderie and sisterhood and brotherhood, all those things. The important stuff, not the things that we can't agree on. God's been kind to teach me, and I needed it, teach me kindness. Sometimes I listen, sometimes I don't listen so well. But I do know that mean-spirited Christian is an oxymoron. They do not go together. So why would anyone want to be like us? What do we have that anybody else would want? What do we do that would attract others to us? The story we read from Genesis comes to us from the beginning of time. It comes to us first by oral tradition. And we find this story with a few variations in cultures all over the world. All over the world. And it's a story that the Creator who shared creation, who risked creation, became so grieved because of the sin and evil in it that he wished he had never created anything and seeks to destroy it. Humanity is saved when a family builds a boat, an ark. The setting for our hero is during a religious abandonment. Sin, unethical behavior, immorality abounded, and life was very cheap. The powerful used life to amuse themselves. And we're told it became so dark that the God of creation actually grieved for humankind. But as bad as it was, one man and his family found favor in God's eyes. And the Hebrew word there is shin. Shin. And that word simply means a superior being reaching down to an inferior being and pulling that inferior being up. Grace. He had done nothing worthy of salvation. It was God's gift to Noah and God's gift to Noah's family. Except by the grace of God, they would have drowned like everyone else. So God speaks to Noah and warns him of the impending doom, and he gives him explanation for the means of salvation and gives him the design for it. So many cubits this way, so many cubits that way. It was going to be a large boat made of gopher wood. And I'm sure he was a little hesitant at first, but Noah took God serious and built that thing out there in the middle of nowhere. I can also believe that there was a lot of scorn that received by Noah, a lot of ridicule and ribbing, and I would imagine he was humiliated several times. Can you imagine what people were saying about him as they walked by? He's building a boat in the desert? Huh? Where are you going to get the water for that thing? Hey, Noah. It's a big old yacht there, isn't it? How are you going to get it to the lake? Better hurry. Tide's going out. And I imagine there was a flip side to that. I imagine those people who saw that were also thinking, what does he know that we don't know? Maybe what he's doing is important. And when that starts happening, people get angry and upset and they start wagging fingers, And I imagine the religious folk got all the buzz and say, nobody told us to build a boat. God would have told us first if God wanted a boat. Now, I think this story strikes a somewhat contemporary note. Something as unsettling as it was, it resonates today because I hate to inform you, but there's immorality in our country. There's immorality in our land. There's unethical behavior in our country. There is sin among us. And life is still cheap. Life is still cheap. When we go to Israel on the trip, I go take the group to the Holocaust Museum there. And you weave in and out of it, and you become a part of it because the pictures are bigger than you are. You just feel like you're in Auschwitz or Dachau. And I've watched over the years how less and less the influence is on the people who go. Even to the point where you step over the shoes to get outside. There's the shoes of the victims are underneath the plexiglass, and you have to step over those shoes. I have watched us become immune to that. You know, we talk about the Khmer Rouge killing 2 million people, and it just doesn't faze us anymore. The numbers don't faze us. 17, we talked about 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, but now that figure is being rounded up to 17 million. But does it faze us? No, because life is still cheap, and I say that because I read the other day one of the growing things in Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit, and Pittsburgh, some of the largest northern cities. One of their main entertainment things now is to toss, and I'm going to use the word, it's not politically correct, but I'm going to use the word, to toss a midget. You go into the bar, and you pay $10, and there's Velcro on a wall, and there's Velcro on the little guy, and you pick him up and you toss him against the wall, and he sticks. Think about that for a second. For $10, you get to totally humiliate another human being. And it's a small move from that to mass shootings. It took tremendous faith for Noah to respond the way he did. It was illogical. It was unheard of. It ran against the standards of the day. He could have been out there partying with the whole crowd. Why would he be such a killjoy? Eat, drink, and be merry. No, Moses, don't do this. Don't spend your time building a boat of gopher wood. You just had gas. It wasn't God. It was just heartburn. It wasn't God. And as I thought about this text and prayed over this text, I've concluded that the church is not too unlike that ark. In our age, the Christian church looks just about as silly as that ship setting out there in the desert. In our age, the Christian church is illogical. It's unnecessary. And yes, it's actually powerless to the world. So it takes faith. It takes a lot of faith to be a part of this ark, to build this ark, to maintain this ark. It takes a lot of faith to give ourselves to it, to give to it our hard-earned resources and time and energy. The world's calling us, just buy you some more football tickets with your tithes and offerings. Go travel on the weekend. Go do this. Don't worry about going to church. You don't need church. It takes faith. When our bodies are tired and screaming for downtime, and then we get that call to go to a meeting or go to an event or to do this project, when it had been easier to put our feet up and kick the lazy boy back and enjoy the television. But the church is not a building. It's not an address. It's not a style of architecture, and it's not even a style of worship. The church is the faith of a people that binds them in unity to do the ministry and mission of Jesus Christ. It's the faith of people being called in the face of the popular, in the face of the logical, to forgive enemies and giving the cloak, even when your coat has been demanded, giving your cloak also. It's illogical. In short, the church is the people of God responding as the people of God, living out the kingdom of God Church is not where people are in authority. Church is where God is the authority. Church is where the holy is the most important thing. Not what we wear, what we do, how we do it, the temperature in the sanctuary, or when we do this or when we do that. The important thing is God is in our midst, leading us to be the kingdom. Lastly, I think that ark was the hope of humanity. And I think it's the same thing with the church. I think we're the last hope of our society and our culture. During the deep waters of madness and division and rancor and violence and immorality and unethical behavior resides the Christian church. And we're floating on those dark, dark, deep waters. And we're called, as we're floating along, to reach down into those who are not able to swim, those who are going under the wave, and lift them up and pull them out and offer them the grace of God. Now, the ark that Noah built was not a perfect ark. I bet $1 to a donut there was a few leaks in that boat. And it's the same with the Christian church. There's some leaks in our boat. There's some leaks in our boat. But the church is the final hope of God for the world. Let me close with this one little story concerning two boys who were talking about Noah and the ark, and they were thinking about the odors, like little boys would do. They're thinking about the odors and the noise and the inconvenience of being cooped up in that boat with all those animals and being crowded and how dirty all that would have gotten. And the problem was separating animals that were natural enemies, so on and so forth. And the question is, why did Noah keep 2 mosquitoes? One of the boys said, I just don't think I could stand that. And the other little boy thought for a while, and he said, well, yes, it must have been awful, but think of it another way. It was still the best thing afloat. So is the church. So is the Christian church. That's the way I feel about church. It ain't perfect, but still the best thing afloat. So let us invite, if you will, let us invite the Spirit of God back to our lives anew, back to our lives afresh, and get over ourselves and get on with God. Focus upon the essential things of our faith and become the ark that God at Pentecost intended for us to be. Amen.